We're going to rock and roll, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Office Hours. I'm Chris Wooley, the photo professor, and we are looking at photos today. We're going to be critiquing them. I do appreciate so many of you submitted images. Just in this last day or two, I've had a flood of images come in for critique, so thank you so very much for sharing your work so that we can look at it and we can grow and help together. We probably won't have time to get through all the images that were submitted today, but I'm going to do my best to have us kind of chug along on this one. What we don't finish today, we'll look at next week that's up here. So as always, feel free to chime in if you do have questions. I do have chat open, but sometimes I get distracted or into the photoshopping, so I might miss it. So make sure that we're paying attention if we can on that one. All right, so we're going to come in. I've got my screen shared here, and a little tweak this time based on the feedback that I got from you before, that it was hard to read all the Photoshop menus. So I changed my screen size so we can see it a little bit bigger that's coming up here. So I'll pop into that corner. So hopefully you can see things that are a little bit easier. So let's jump right in and have some fun. So up first, I've got an image from Wallace, and this is a RAW file that's submitted. And the thing that I really love about RAW files, we don't have any of the processing that's done on it, so we can look at how to actually process these RAW files. Because when we have all the information that's present in the RAW file, we can pull the extremes. There's so much information that's hidden and embedded in these files, so we can really work it and pull stuff out. So I'm going to show you how I would go about processing some of these files. So up first, we're going to look at this image from Wallace. So when I'm just taking that initial viewpoint on it, I notice that we've got a lot of really bright highlights, some really deep shadows that are coming through. So we're going to want to balance out tonality on this. And I'm going to show you my favorite ways for doing that. So whenever I'm looking at an image, first thing I want to do is try to get as much of that neutral profile as possible. That way when I'm doing all the retouching and the things in Photoshop, I'm not working on the very extremes. Instead, I've got that middle ground that's already a good starting point. We just need to do a little cleanup. So for Wallace's image, we're just going to be looking at how we do that initial processing that's coming through. And first up, I'm going to be looking at the profile settings. I'm in Adobe Camera Raw. This could be the same thing as Lightroom or Capture One if you're in there. But under the profile settings, this is a new feature that Adobe has added in this last couple of updates. So normally we're going to see our color profile, the Adobe color. That's going to be kind of our standard. But because we're working with a RAW file, we can now utilize a new tool that they have called Adaptive Color. So kind of keep this in mind. This is what our standard processing is. If we put it into like portrait processing, it maybe lowers that contrast a little bit, but the adaptive color, it's got to do a little bit of thinking because it's using AI to actually analyze the image. And look what it just did. It brought down all those highlights. It lightened up all those shadows that are coming up there. And that's just this adaptive color. Notice that none of the sliders for like our exposure value have been changed at all. We just popped it into that one profile setting. And now we've got a slider where we can increase the effect or pull it back to our original. I'm going to go ahead and bump this one up to about 150%, really pulling in those details. So we've got such a lighter, brighter image, so much nicer than just popping into our normal portrait color mode, because it's actually analyzing this image and applying a specific algorithm to it that's going to help us maximize the effectiveness of this specific single image. So that is great. Now I can start in with the tweaking. And I've got a lot of hot spots that we need to kind of tone down so we can keep the focus on our central subject. So I'm just going to come over here to the highlights tab and just pull that one way down. I'm going to go pretty extreme and bring that down to -100. So we've got a lot of the highlights pulled down, and we can actually do that with the whites a bit too. So we can pull those ones down just a little bit. So now we don't have anything that's super blinding white. Look at that. Our whites are now pulled down and manageable. Most of this information's in our deeper midtones and our shadows. So we can lighten up some of those shadows because we got some pretty heavy areas by bumping up that shadow slider a little bit. And I like the black slider as a way of just overall lightening the image without making it feel too processed. So we've got a really nice neutral look to it, but some of the colors are looking a little bit fake. Particularly those greens, they just have almost a radioactive aspect to it because we processed it so much. So it still has all that saturation information, even though we've massively lightened the tonal values on them. So we need to address that. So I'm going to come down here in this all the way down to the color mixer tab. And in the color mixer tab, I'm looking at what my primary colors in the scene are. I've got some beautiful warm tones. I've got some nice vibrant blues and greens. Now, greens establish a little bit of the setting, but they're not where my subject is. So the greens are going to want to be what I handle first. So what I'm going to do is just come to the saturation, find our greens, and I can just pull those down. Just pulling down that saturation level on them. In this case, about -30 or so. Looks pretty good. Now the background feels a little bit more natural. Our subjects still have that full vibrance, so we've got that color contrast that's popping with it. So this one's starting to work for me. We might tweak the blues just a little bit, maybe pulling those down just a hair, just so that our warm colors are the most dominant color in this scheme, and we've got blues, which are complementary to it, on the opposite side. So it helps us kind of pull those things together. In terms of overall finishing for it, we might do something like warm up the scene just a little bit to really embrace those warm tones that are coming through. And maybe now that we have a nice ratio of all these colors, just pull down this overall saturation just a little bit. So a lot of little tweaks that went into this, but when we're looking at it, we now have a clear focus on our subjects. We've got that established scene. Everything feels nice and natural to it, and it feels like we're actually there. We're standing there. So this is how I would go about doing the raw processing on it, and this is kind of bringing up a cool theme that we're going to explore a lot today, is our dominant colors and how we can play with colors to really draw focus into it. So this is what I'd be looking at on this one. Let's pop into another image. And so I've got this one from Tammy, and this is a cool scene that we've got here. I love this little sleeping guy. We've got some really interesting composition, just a sea of sea lions that are coming up here. So kind of fun. This one, our composition is really, really dominant, so it's kind of hard to look at our tones and the finessing until we do something that really pulls focus into it. And I love this story that's here. So I'm inside a raw still, and I'm just going to pop over and hit the crop tab. So we can start looking at what the crop on this might be. How do we get effective with it? So I can see this bottom part's not adding a whole lot to the story. This guy's a story. This is a secondary element. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of crop up, getting rid of some of that stuff. I don't know what my final crop is, but I like him kind of weighting that bottom aspect of it. Got a lot at the top. It could be kind of cool, but I'm thinking that the story is not so much this stuff up here. Maybe this guy can kind of lead us so that we don't exit the frame. Kind of happy with what this vertical look is. Seeing that this is a very bright spot, pulls my attention away. I'm going to go ahead and bring that in, even though it's a cool element. I think it's a little bit distracting. And then finally, we've got a lot of space over here, including some big highlights. So I'm going to pull those ones in too. And you know what? I'm already pretty close to putting this on the third mark, so I'm just going to go ahead and bump that in just a little bit and get a little bit tighter composition here. I'm gonna tighten this up now that we know our main crop just a little teeny tiny bit. Maybe bring that in just a hair and come up here. And now we've got something that's really visually interesting. We got some great storytelling that's here. So we're going to reinforce our tones still in this raw format. So we've got all sorts of detail. So I'm looking up here in my histogram, and I can see that I've got a lot of stuff in the shadow area. And that's all this big space that's up here, as well as some highlights that are coming through all the way up to pure whites. So we're going to adjust these tones. So I'm going to come back up to my slider, looking at it. We could try popping it into like adaptive color on it. In this case, adaptive color did not work. It had a lot of contrast in it. I'm not a fan of what that one's doing. So we're going to take this out and say, you know what? Let's look at maybe a standard mode. See what's happening? That's a little bit flatter. That one kind of works for me. So we'll keep that one. So first thing I'm looking at is this dark, dark area, that dark space on my histogram. We're going to lighten that up. I'm going to take these shadows and just start lightening it up. I don't need to go full on where we've got a ton of detail, because I still want it to be a shadow. I just don't want it to be as big and heavy of a spot. So about 60 feels pretty good. Maybe lighten up the overall image with that black slider just a hair. Feeling pretty good about how my shadows are looking. Let's do the same thing for the highlights, because I've got some really bright spots that are kind of pulling attention away. So I'm going to take that highlight slider and pull it down. Just see what that one's doing. It's really helping with this area on the face. Helps with some areas over there. We're going to pull that one all the way down because I think we've got the flexibility to do that, and maybe pull that white slider down just a hair. So we've now massively reduced the contrast in the scene, which allows us to really enjoy this composition that we've got going on. I'm going to go ahead and lower the contrast just a teeny tiny bit more on the image so we get this nice kind of cohesive piece that's there. Next up, I'm looking at where my eye's being drawn, and all these really warm elements where the sun's hitting our fur, that's just pulling attention away from what our central subject is. So we're going to come back down to color, and I love it. We're looking at the color mixer, and I can see that we've got some different tones. So here's a saturation slider that I'm on, and I just want to see what different things are doing. So all of these are at 0 right now, and I can just kind of go back and forth. The reds, maybe hitting a little bit up here, not really doing a whole lot. Don't need to worry about those ones. The oranges. Ooh, oranges are those areas that I'm hitting at. I know that's an area that I want to work on. Let's see if there's anything in the yellows. A little bit in the yellow overlap as well. There might even be some blues on here. A little bit of the blues that are coming throughout this. So I can see that the oranges and the yellows are going to be my big areas. So I'm not worried about the color right now. Tonality is what I'm focusing on, but I know the oranges and yellows are where that's at. So I want to pop over here to the luminance tab. And we're looking at those oranges, so I can take this orange slider and just pull it down. And look at what it's doing. It's darkening that area. We can do that with a yellow slider too. Coming down just a little bit. I don't want to go too much, otherwise we lose all the detail on there. It looks really, really fake. So the orange was the heavy hitter. I'm comfortable bringing that one down to -100. And we'll just do a little bit with those yellows. So now we've got some nice shape that's coming up there. If I wanted to, I could lighten up some of those blues, pull in a little bit more attention in those face. I kind of like what that one's doing. See if any of those surrounding colors do anything. Not a whole lot, so we're going to leave them as they are. And now that we've got some tonality going on, we can play with the colors. So the oranges and yellows, they're really, really dominant because we just darkened them, but they've got that full saturation that's happening. So I can take the oranges slider and say, you know what, on the saturation, let's just back that off just a little bit. So I don't need to go all the way down where it's black and white, but I can have it so that's not quite so dominant, not quite so in your face. So I'm going to go maybe -40 here. We can see if we could do that with the yellows. That helps a little bit. Maybe -10, 15, 20. Somewhere that's in there gets those nice spots. Now, if I'm wanting to pull attention into these blues, I could pop up that color just a little bit, but it kind of starts to look a little bit fake. So I'm not going to do that on this image. Instead, I'm going to say, you know what, we've got a nice warm image, on almost a monochromatic feel that's coming throughout with some really strong composition. Now that we've got a good base for it, we can start with the final tweaking on it. So I'm coming back up here to my lights, my light slider, and we can say, okay, I want to pull attention into that face. Maybe we do want to introduce a little bit more of these highlights coming through, just so our face locks it, or our eyes lock into where that face is for that composition. Might want to lighten that up just a hair more. Not a ton is needed, but just that little bit that really allows us to enjoy that scene. And then finally, for a little bit of cohesion, I'm just going to take the temperature slider and just warm up the entire scene as a whole. Now it's adding some cool undertones to these, the warmth that we had inside of this. So everything feels like it's cohesive and belongs together. So kind of a cool way of playing with that. That's how I would go about doing the initial processing. And then when we pop it into Photoshop, we can do all the other cleanup stuff. But we got lots of images to look at. All right, next we got this image from Heidi. Really, really cool texture study that we've got of all different types of pasta coming through. This is so creative. I would have thought about doing something like this, but I'm kind of digging it. I can imagine this being up on the wall of like Olive Garden or a fun Italian restaurant. So looking at this, let's kind of check out what's happening here. We've got so many cool lines, textures, shapes, shadows. The fact that we used hard lighting means that we're going to have really, really aggressive highlights and shadows, which is great for adding texture. That's how we get texture, right? We want light coming from behind. We want to be shaping things and picking up on that texture. So let's start looking at it and say, okay, let's tweak this one. I'm going to go and start with our crop first on it because I think it's massively going to affect how we look at and analyze the image. Specifically, this wood area behind it, it's not adding to the story. Maybe it's on like a cutting board or something. It's got good color harmony. Yes, all of that's working for it, but the texture is where the story is on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in this edge so we can crop out that stuff on the edge. And we're going to do the same on the opposite side. Now we're getting to all that cool pasta. I've got some dark areas down here where the pasta didn't quite extend. I'm just going to crop that off. We don't need it. And this top part, I've got some big dark spots right there, and some dark mergers up here. We're going to bring that one in just a little bit. So I'm up here. I'm almost at a square crop. So this might be kind of a cool one to actually make it square and find that little story that's hidden in between. I'm going to go ahead and get pretty close to that one and say, you know what? This is a cool composition. I like what's happening here. Just the crop by itself just makes this come alive. We're just fully immersed in that story that's there. So let's clean it up just a little bit, do a little bit of playing, and talk about it a little bit more. So we've got some really bright areas and we've got some deep, deep shadows. I'm looking up here in the histogram again. Look at those blues in that deep shadowed area. That's what we're seeing a lot of throughout here. We do a really nice job of controlling our highlights, and those midtones are just beautiful, especially since everything is generally the same color. This is handled really, really well. So for me, I probably wouldn't want to have the really dark areas. If we're just looking at this as a display piece, something that's going to be a piece of art that's on there, I want it to have kind of that warm, romantic feeling about pasta, because we like romantic pasta. So I'm going to take the black slider and just pop that up, because if we hover over this, we can see that it's saying, I don't know if you can see down here, where it's going to say our blacks and our shadows. So I can see it's my blacks that I need to be affecting right here. So I'm going to take those blacks and just push them over. Look at that. I'm now no longer out of gamut, so we're not clipping the blacks by coming up here. And I can even take this a little bit more. These blacks are now starting to merge into the shadows. So I'm going to come back down just to the point of this little icon that says, hey, you're clipping those shadows. For this, about plus 25 will do that. Now I can take those shadows and lighten them up just a little bit more too. So we're getting some nice texture and detail that's throughout there. Our histogram's looking beautiful. Very happy with what's happening with it so far. So I want to balance it out and lower the contrast on this so it doesn't feel as aggressive. We want it to be a little bit more harmonious because we only have happy thoughts when thinking about pasta. So I'm going to pull down those highlights just a little bit and those whites just a little bit just to help flatten out that image. We can also take the contrast slider and pull that back too. Just teeny tiny bit. We've got a beautiful histogram, so we've got really nice representation across the full tonal range. I'm very, very pleased with what's happening here. Next up, we can go and maybe play with the white balance that's on it. We could warm it up if we wanted to have that kind of old world Italian feel to it. Cool it down if we want to really, really play with some of the desaturated shapes that are there. Could be looking at this in black and white, just take away the color entirely and have this just be a texture study. I kind of like the warmth of it, especially since all of this has harmonious colors, and I like seeing those subtle differences on here. So I'm going to add just a little bit of warmth to this, just so that we can add an overall color cast to the image. And we can play with the tint slider to say, do we want more magenta or more green to it? With the case of pasta or those warm things, I think a little bit of magenta adds some nice texture to it. So we get a little bit of that red depth mirrored up here. Red's our dominant color, looking really nice. And if this is too strong, we can just kind of pull back that saturation just a little bit. But I'm kind of a sucker for this full color, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it up at this full brightness. So in this image, we were looking at it, just wanted to pull it up. We found that central thing, and then we just took away that contrast so it has kind of a cohesive piece. So I went pretty fast over these 3 images that we have on here. What do we think of these techniques that are on here? Feel free to chime in on chat or unmute yourself. How are we feeling on Wallace's image with the using the new adaptive color profile that's on it? Kind of cool way to process that. Do we like the moodier high contrast setting or the little bit more desaturated muted scheme that's going on there? How are we feeling about that?
Looks great.
The effect. Yeah.
Wallace approves. I'll take it. There we go. There we go. He's not going to beat me up later. We're good.
Yeah. Chris, one thing I was wondering about, and of course it's up to Wallace's choice. Excuse me, but my eye keeps going back to that van back there. And I'm just kind of wondering if maybe that should be taken out so that total focus could be on the 4 cute kids up front.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. And it depends on what our final usage of the image is going to be. I'd 100% agree with you that the van's a distraction. The people are probably distractions too, because we do have a bit of a merger. and we've already got a really high contrast scene with kind of the splotchy light that's coming through. The light kind of adds some realism for me, so I'm a little bit more okay with that, but our background elements are distracting, which means that if we're doing something like competition, we probably want to take those out, unless you're keeping it in like a reportage type category where we can't actually remove elements from it. So it depends on what your goal is for the final image. If this is documenting what your trip is and we're trying to get a cohesive feeling from what your travels were, I'd probably take all of those elements out. If you're doing something that's going to be reportage or we're using this for community awareness, then I'd leave it because it feels a little bit more natural and very real. So depends on what our goals are with it. Okay, what about Tammy's? Oh, yeah. Did you have a comment on that, Wallace?
Well, I was thinking about the background as well. The van and the it looks like some kids in the back, and that was it.
Yeah, so so this is the remove tool that's inside of Camera Raw, and it's pretty cool. We can just like highlight some of these things. Say, you know what? Let's get these people going on. So if we don't have to stick with reportage categories, or this isn't for like a humanitarian thing where we want to not have it look overly edited, we can just select those and then hit the remove button. It's going to be thinking about these areas. This is not using any generative credits either. But it's going to think about it, and then it pulls them out for us, which is kind of fun. And it actually did a pretty decent job. A little bit of cleanup. I think we could probably clean up that area a little bit more and say, you know what, let's remove that too. Going to do some thinking, and now we've got those distractions gone with just a couple of clicks. Blows my mind how good some of this AI stuff is at being able to pick up things. And we could do other stuff, like if there's other distracting elements, we could totally pull those out too. I think there's a line where you can go too far, get too much cleanup. For me, kind of the rawness and the realness of this image are what make it so impactful. I wouldn't want to take out absolutely everything that's there, because I love the scene and setting that it's in. And this dappled light, for whatever reason, it just makes me really happy. That's normally not the case, but I like what it's doing with this scene. Okay, so moving on, we've got Tammy's image here. How are we feeling about the color and the crop that's going on? Any thoughts? Did we like it wider? What's that?
I appreciate your vision on this, because when I look at it, and of course standing there taking pictures, I see a sea of sea lions, right? And so to be able to focus in and pull that out, but still maintain that concept that there's a whole bunch of those critters all hanging out together, and give a nice focus point. I really appreciate that. And then pushing the orange and red, and that was interesting to watch.
It's kind of fun ways to process it. I do see one person, Pat, in chat saying that likes the crop, but wish the main face was a little lighter. Super easy to do. We can just come over here to the adjustment brushes, and we can do something like object selection. I can just do a quick selection over here. It's going to think about it, and it's going to say, okay, look how quick that mask was on that face. Now I can say, you know what? Let's pull up those highlights where we want to be looking at. Maybe the exposure just a little bit. And maybe we warm it up just a hair. That way our eyes are really, really drawn to it. So kind of fun. Do we like the before or after on the face being lightened?
Love the lighting.
We like it later?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
I do. I like the draw to it. Yes.
Cool.
I brought down crop on the top just a little bit, because you've got some hot spots right at the top on both left and right side.
Oh, up here? Yep, that's a great spot. So this would be really nice where we can take an adjustment brush again, or come over here, and I'm just going to use brush in this case. And what we're going to do is say, you know what? We're going to want contrast really low. Let's pull those highlights down, and let's take the exposure down just a little bit. And we'll bump up the shadows just so we don't get too dark. So what I can do is now with this adjustment brush, I can just go in and just paint this area. Paint this area up here. Both of them are coming in, and now it's going to be applying what's happening here. If I take it down, you can see it a little bit more extreme, but we have our whites. Now we're just barely losing color that's up there. And if there's something else that's kind of distracting, like maybe this section in the bottom corner, we can just paint over it. I love being able to control our contrast that way. Keeps us locked in. That similar thing, if we said, hey, this is too dark, we could always do another one. I'm just doing a brush here and say, let's kind of paint in this area. And you know what? We're just going to come up here and we're going to take some of these shadows and lighten them up just a hair. If you like that lower, I kind of liked the contrast before, but if we liked it and thought that it was too dark or too dominating, we can always lighten those ones up. And if we went too much, we can reduce the effect of it too. Just with that slider. I love that slider. There we go. So kind of an interesting way on looking at that. Okay, coming up into Heidi's with the pasta. Such a creative thing. How are we feeling about the square crop on there?
I love how when you crop it, the focus is right on it. Your eyes go right to it.
You're immersed in that sea of texture. Yeah, the color harmony, the texture, all working there. I do appreciate that she used the spaghetti to kind of divide and add some tension to it. Notice how that we have this diagonal one. It would have been very, very easy just to have it a sea of everything integrated or small little piles. This gives us a very defined design element. We've got some nice repetition of pattern of vertical lines. The swoopy stuff definitely likes it. I like this image, Heidi. I think you got some cool stuff here. All right. We're going to move on because we got more to look at, and I love it. Okay, so up next, we've got Summer Morning. This one's from John Crowley, and holy cow, this is a beautiful view. I really, really appreciate, and I got to brag on him for just a minute, how we've got, let me get to a harder brush and something a little bit smaller so I can mark up on this, how we've got kind of a foreground subject that's up here, and then we've got a midground, and then we have a background. So we have depth that's coming through here like crazy. And it is working really well. We've got a spot for the eye to land. We're allowed to explore this scene, come up into it. Really, 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 really well done. I think we can clean it up just a little bit. I've got a couple of suggestions, so I'm curious on your thoughts on it. So this one kind of playing with our theme of color. I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that. And I hit Control or Command J to make a copy of that layer. And I'm going to open up Camera Raw Filter. And inside of Camera Raw, we've got a much better color mixer than you can get just using the hue saturation one or the normal color mixer inside of Photoshop. That's why I'm in Camera Raw. I think it's easier for applying all these effects together. So what I'm seeing is we have a very, very saturated foreground and a very low contrast midground. And then our background, we get some saturation coming back through again. And so we're competing element-wise. And so what I want to do is take our secondary elements, which is actually in our foreground, and reduce the prominence of them and really emphasize this background. That way it's got kind of a natural journey that wants you to go and explore what that mountain is. And to do that, I'm going to come over here to my greens and yellows, and I'm looking at this area right here. We've got our greens. We can pull down that saturation, and it just kind of takes the edge off of it. I'm going to do that with the yellows too, just a little bit. It's going to hit up here, as well as those oranges. So now we've got what feels a little bit more realistic. Like if you're actually standing there, it doesn't feel overly saturated. It feels very natural that's coming through. Next, I'm looking at the background elements. I want to pull a little bit more attention to this sky and some of this area back here. So I'm going to go ahead and bump up the saturation of my blues and these aqua colors that's in that in between, kind of this mid area, and put a little bit more prominence on that background. So now we've taken down the focus just on colors from the foreground, and we've put it and kind of restored it on that background element. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK just so we can quickly see a before and after on this one. Little bit of a change, but really pulls attention away. And if it's too much, we can just back off that slider too. Go whoop, just a little bit. So I kind of like it, so I'm going to leave it pretty heavy at about 80% here. So there's one other thing, and this one's getting into presentations. So presentations, I think, frustrates everybody. I was just talking with Sarah earlier today about them, that I think they're a little bit of a holdover from the early days of print competition when we actually needed to have physical presentations because they were handling prints and didn't want the artwork being focused on. We switched to digital, and it kind of carried over from there, and now we've got this artifact, if you will, of presentations on images. My guess is in the next few years, we're going to start to see them go away, kind of like how the World Photographic Cup doesn't use them. But right now, it's one of the 12 elements if you're entering into a PPA style competition. So we've got this element area here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the main part in here. I'm just using the marquee tool to do that. And I'm going to invert my selection. So select, inverse, so it's actually just the frame or the border that's selected, so that we can look at his mat, the presentation that's on here. And I'm going to come up here and just do a levels adjustment layer. And with this, I can now change our tonality of what this is. So we have a pure black presentation mat. And black is a little bit of a risky color. Same with white. It can be a little bit risky because we're going to be pulling in to those specific tones and highlighting where they are or are not. And in this case, if I'm looking at the image, we don't really dip into black. Maybe a little bit on these shadows here, a little bit over here. For the most part, we're in kind of these mid-tones throughout everything with some really strong highlights. And so our black reinforces that we only have a couple areas that are dark. So we might consider having a slightly lighter presentation. And I'm just in this outputs, the levels adjustment. I'm looking at the output levels. And I can take the blacks and I can just say, no, we don't want pure black anywhere. We want to lighten this up. And as far as I drag it over, it's going to match. That's the darkest that we can go in those areas. So we could be up to pure white. Has kind of a cool fine art feel to it. Don't recommend pure white for doing any sort of image comp presentation, because when the judges are looking at it in a really dark room, this white is just going to glow and it's going to dominate everything. Even though if this was hanging in a gallery, white would be a fantastic choice because it really reaffirms our mountain. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down just a little bit, and let's start looking at what some of these tonalities get. When we get into kind of this dark gray, this medium gray, this is more in line with where most of our tones are. So this actually adds a really nice cohesiveness to the image. It keeps it so that we're allowed to enjoy the brights, we can enjoy the darks, but it overall has that less fatigue on the eye as we're looking at it. Next, I'm looking at this keystroke that we have. And when we were looking at the pure dark, it was pretty subtle, which was nice. We want kind of that subtle accent that's on there. But the key line in this one being so far out and pulling colors from it are greens, which is not our primary subject, are kind of blues and almost purplish undertones tend to be a little bit more of that primary color. So for me, I'd cut out the entire key line entirely and just let it be focused on that neutral colored mat. That way all the focus is staying in on our central subject and we are emphasizing coming outwards. It's already so strong in composition, we don't need to add that design element in. What do you guys think? Do we like the black mat? Do we like it a little bit lighter? And how do we feel about the color toning? Did it work with being less vibrant, or did it have more pop with you with the deeper saturated colors? Everybody speechless? Yep, okay. Fat saying yes on the gray. I'll take it. Tammy liked the darker one. Slightly darker gray. Okay, pulling it down just a little bit of that tone. This feeling a little bit better on it? Something. So one word of caution, and again, this is a little bit more PPA affiliate style competition things. So I do want to be mindful of having my mat be close to 50% gray. And the reason that I want to do that is look at how similar this mat is to the background that's behind it. If I were to darken it just a little bit, so it was about, say, this tone, see how it almost blends into the background, the neutral background that the judges will be viewing against. So I want to make sure that I'm not too dark, because I don't want it to hit that same colored background that the judges might be looking at. So I need some contrast so they know where the edge of the frame is, and it doesn't just feel like it's the picture that's just floating there by itself. All right. We're going to move on. Look up here. We've got image from Crystal Craft. And so we've got a really, really high contrast, down printed image. And I'm assuming that they saw, that Crystal saw this really cool texture that's happening in the trees and was like, I need this in my life. So looking at it, we've got a lot of busyness and high contrast elements that are coming through. It's almost like they're separate stories that are on here. We've got these really cool trees that are kind of leading us in. We've got some really interesting architecture, or not architecture, but landscapes that are coming up back here. We've got a pretty interesting diagonal line that's coming through. So we've got a lot of different elements inside the image. And right now, they're all kind of competing against each other. I don't know where to look. There's so much texture, and this is mostly the time of day that it's photographed. I can tell by looking down here and seeing some of these shadows that we were at a time of day where we're going to have pretty harsh light. And because of that, we end up with really deep shadows and really bright highlights. It has been printed down, so we aren't fully exposing what the sky is. We don't have a pure white that's looking anywhere. If I were to bring up, say, like a histogram inside of this, we can see that we kind of stop. The last third of where all those highlights are don't exist in this image. It's all in those mid-tones, and we come down and we don't quite hit black, which is nice because that means that there's going to be some detail that's in here. So we've got some playroom that's on there. But it's been processed, and it's been kind of flattened and a little bit underprinted that's on there. So we have to decide what the story is on this image. And for me, I think that the texture on the trees are probably going to be the most visually interesting thing here. And so I'm going to come down and take out the sky and the rock formation, which could be a cool composition by itself, just looking at that. But in our case, I think that the trees are probably going to be our story. So I'm cropping down here, and I can see that I've got a little bit of this sky there. Probably come down just a little bit more because I don't necessarily need to see the very, very tips of the trees. I don't want to lose those branches, though. I don't need as much of this bottom part, so I'm going to crop up just a little bit higher and let the road kind of do a little bit of that framing for me. This area over here, we're getting a lot of texture from the background, so I'm going to pull that in. Now I'm starting to see, like, hey, maybe this is my primary center of interest. Something kind of cool that's happening here. We'll leave that in there and maybe tuck in this area just a little bit because we get some dark tones that are there. So we got something kind of fun. I don't think I need the dark tones on the bottom as much. And let's go ahead and apply that crop and make it a little bit bigger. Now we've got something that's really interesting, a strong center of interest. We can kind of play into the chaotic aspect that's there. I do want to show you a little bit of a technique for lightening up some of these darker areas. This is a really cool thing, and I don't think a lot of people utilize this one. I'm going to pop open the clone tool. And what I'm going to do is change my blending mode from normal, which it is. So if I were on normal with a, say, 100% flow that are going there, if I copy something, it's going to be identical. It's copied over there. And I just put that on a new layer. So we don't want that one. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this blending mode from normal, and I'm going to move it down to lighten. Because what I want to do, I want to lighten up these areas. So now what happens is I can sample an area. Let's put this on a new layer. And I've got current and below so that it'll actually go on this new layer. And when I highlight an area or use that as the clone sample source, I can paint in to other areas, and it's going to take only those highlighted elements that are coming through. So I can lighten up specific areas, and it's only going to paint that down if it's going to be lighter than what the previous element is. So notice that I am getting a little bit of clone tracking there, like that's the same pattern. So I want to make sure that I'm sampling from a new area. And I don't want it to be super obvious, so I'm going to take down my flow to 15%. And that is my favorite spot to have flow, because that means when I paint with it, same settings that are on here, it's now going to slowly build up. So I can do a quick pass and just have it barely be there, or I can really scrub if I want to lighten up a whole bunch of things. So now I can very subtly pull attention away from areas I don't want it, like maybe right here, I'm being kind of brought out. Let's lighten that just a little bit. Maybe right here is a little bit dark. Just a hair. Doesn't take much. Lighten it. Maybe that's a little bit distracting here. Get some kind of fun spots. So we can play with this. Again, I think it's pretty underutilized. I've seen a lot of people maybe change the blending mode from normal to lighten to do it. But if you change your clone tool, so when it puts it down as lighten, it's not even going to capture the dark areas. It only captures the light areas. So it's analyzing what you're sampling versus what's actually on that layer. So on this image, how are we feeling about the crop on it? For me, I think that this gives us a strong center of interest, which would be kind of cool. It'd be really neat to process it in color to see if maybe we can use some of those color controls to pull down the background that's on it. But right now, I think the image is probably too busy, and that's just a time of day that it was photographed, to be something that's going to be like, wow, really high scoring in image competition. But I think it's got some good bones to it, and I would love to see you kind of come back during this time and really play, or a different time of day, but come back to the same scene and play with it. But how are we feeling with this crop on there? Yeah, all right. Had anybody used the blending mode change on your clone tool before, or is that a new technique? We've used it before. It's so subtle, but I think it's one of those secret weapons that you're like, oh, dang, this thing's cool. This thing's cool. It goes on. So I've got an image from Jerry, and this is one's pretty low resolution, so we won't be able to really dive in deep to look at it, but we can check it out as a whole. What's it doing? What's working? on here, and this is a fun scene. I really appreciate that we've got some neat directional lines that are coming through. Really interesting. We've got a strong center of interest that's coming up here, but all this is kind of leading in to the central place. And I was like, oh, that is fun. So really, really nice job on the composition aspect of it. So I think we can pull a little bit more focus into the central area, which is where our story is, and a lot of stuff's going there, but we do get kind of pulled out by some of these tangents on the edges and on the side. So we want to figure out, all right, how do we kind of reduce the prominence of those and keep that focus on this central bit? And we're going to play with our color. This time I'm going to use the channel mixer that's up here where we've got our red, greens, and blues. And we can kind of see like what happens when we start playing with some specific colors that are coming throughout here. And we can select on the color if you've never used the channel mixer. It's kind of fun because we could pick the red, green, and blue channels that are coming up here. And we can start playing with different tones that are there. So this allows us to subtly change some of our undertones. So if I'm looking right here in our greens, we've got a slight magenta cast that's coming throughout. So we can say, okay, I can reduce maybe some of the greens that are there and add more of that in, or bump up the greens to say, okay, let's counter what that's going out. So it's a fun way of being able to play with some of those colors. You may have done something similar to it. If I'm going to take that one out and look at like the levels adjustment, we can go up here with the red, greens, and blues, and we can play with what the individual colors are there too. Another fun way to kind of control our colors, but I digress on what that one is. So we're coming back up here to our channel mixer, and we can say, okay, let's start putting that focus on these blues heavy. So I'm going to come up here in this blue. We've got this blue saturated, and we can kind of play with some of those colors. I'm just going to bring this in, warming it up just a little bit, because I'm taking away blue, which adds yellow, because it's the opposite side of that color scheme, right? So we can kind of play in and say, okay, how do we neutralize that now just a little bit more? We bumped up kind of our reds here. So our greens that we're playing with this one, so we could do our magenta cast. I thought I had a slight magenta tint to it, so we can kind of color balance this up here and find something that kind of makes us happy. And red, we can kind of play. This one's just all by feeling. What are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? And I kind of like that blue coming through here. Slight change on there. Do we like the kind of retro toning that's coming up here? Or is this not adding much into it? I'm undecided. It does feel kind of strong that's up there, but I think it does add a little bit more harmony or unity that's on there. What do you think? Color toned? Not color toned. Maybe too subtle to see? Okay, let's look at something else that we can do here. So we can be playing with more of our colors that are on here. This time I'm going to pop just like we did before up here, and this is the unchanged one, so I didn't have that effect. And we're going to look at it in camera raw filter. And let's go down to our color changing that's up here and say, okay, blues, those are definitely something we want to be focusing on. So let's take these blues and make those a little bit stronger. And our greens, that's pulling attention away. Let's pull those ones down so they're less focused. So now we've got kind of a central theme that's coming up through here. Kind of cool. Our reds and oranges, they're pulling a little bit of attention away, so we can take those down just a hair. Something that's kind of fun that's up here. So now we've got a really heavy sky that kind of brings us up here so we aren't brought in or focusing on those distractions quite as much. What do we think on this color change? Like it? Like it before? Like it after? Okay. So Tammy's saying we like the tend to go towards the intense color, but can see attraction with the color change that's on there. So different ways of looking at it. I think that it's a really strong image as is, and there's a bunch of different ways that we could process it, but it all depends on that story. Like doing something cool too, like let's just bring this in and bump up the warmth on the color temperature. Kind of changes how we feel too. And if it's too much on the edges, we could just mask that off as well. Coming up here, nice and big, say, oop. Let's actually put that on a mask. Here we go. And I'm just kind of darkening those areas so we don't get that nice one, and we'll blur out that feather. If you're working on the masks, by the way, I've got my properties panel that's open up here. I love working with really, really harsh lines. So this is what this mask is looking like right now. I just hit Alt or Option and click on the mask if you want to see what it looks like in black and white. Notice that it's done really, really hard edge that's up there. I can just take the feather slider now and soften it up. And this is kind of cool because now I can go in precisely where I need it and then just soften up those lines. So I love using the feather tool that's inside the properties panel with it. It's a really nice way to get exactly the outlines and extractions that you want and then subtly blend it back in. So before and after, pretty subtle on these things, but I think this one was already really, really close to exactly what it needed there. Be interested in seeing something that had maybe not as compressed of a JPEG to see if we can cover some of these shadowed areas, but for what we're looking at, I think this is a pretty strong one. All right, we got from Mary, Hot Model. So this is a cool art piece, and things that I'm looking at it where that's a little bit interesting, stuff we don't see every day, is our mixture of having that, let me come down to a small brush that's up here. So we've got our stroke. Oh, I've got my colors changed. There we go. And we'll sample a color here. Okay. I've got my stroke that's coming around. And then we tend to break it. So we've got this design element that's breaking it. We've got other areas that are stopping at the edge and subtle areas that are kind of heading out. So this gives us a kind of a double take aspect of it. So we look at it and they're like, okay, something different's happening here. So what's working and why are we doing it? So I do like that we have kind of this grunge distressed aspect of it. It looks like we're using some negative mask to take away part of it. We're painting in some areas so that we've got that mask of the scene that she's in, definitely playing into those elements. The keystroke is an interesting design choice where we can kind of pull some of that focus or feel like it's got a frame, and then we're able to break that frame. So I like the core idea that we have here. I think we can do a little bit of cleanup for it. Specifically what I'm looking at, we've got a really harsh line that's right here. This makes me feel like we're at the edge of the frame versus it being an intentional applied effect. We also come up a little bit harsh over here. So I think we can kind of work with those ones just a little bit. I think the keystroke is a little bit wide. Would love it if maybe she broke that line so that we don't see it as much. So let's kind of play with some of those things real quick. I'm just going to do a new layer, and let's get rid of that keystroke real quick. I'm just going to paint with white, and there we go. And I'll do a nice big brush just to kind of get rid of this stuff real quickly. I'm holding down Shift and clicking, which means that your brush is going to do a perfectly straight line so that we've got that coming across. So now that's gone. And let's break up a little bit of this texture that's coming up on those edges. So I could do something like maybe sampling over here, and I can kind of paint some of this area just so we have something that feels like it's not just a harsh line that's coming through. Maybe a little bit like that. Kind of play with these things. So we got something that's interesting there. Now if we want to add in a stroke, instead of being square, I'm going to do a little bit more of an elliptical one. So something that kind of comes up here, and I'm going to have it intercept our subject just a hair, so it feels like she's maybe breaking through. That feels kind of cool. A little bit off-centered that's on there. Let's go do this one. I'm going to put this on a new layer, and we'll go Edit Stroke. And I'm going to sample kind of a red from her, since this feels like a design element. There we go. Something like that feels pretty good. And now we've got kind of a stroke that's there. So we can take our subject and we can mask out like where the skin's touching, so we don't have that hitting into our subject. And maintaining that 3D-ish, almost kind of breaking out of the frame. Could be kind of interesting. Although I think I kind of like it better without. Not entirely sure on that one, but if we are going to break the frame, that could be interesting. Next other thing that I'm looking at is this white is very, very dominant. It's pulling attention away. It's competing up against the subject. So we want to kind of tone that down and maybe make it feel a little bit more cohesive. This has like a distressed, kind of rugged feel to it, and the bright white just pulls your attention and makes it feel very contemporary. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to pop over to my libraries. And if you're never using libraries, holy cow, you got to change it and start implementing library usage right away. This is basically just a spot where you can keep design assets that you use all the time, whether it's stuff that you've downloaded from Adobe Stock or photos that you've uploaded yourself. But we can take all of these and I can say, you know what, here's a grunge texture. Let's just throw that on here. I don't have to go searching in my files and find out where that is. I've just got my grunge texture that's up here. We'll kind of center that just a little bit more so it fits the subject. There we go. and I just dragged it and dropped it. So if there's something that you're using all the time, like maybe your signature, maybe your studio's logo, anything like that, you could do it and be like, hey, let's throw in a signature that's on here. And I could scale that down. And now I could sign it. This isn't my artwork, but I could sign it, right? So kind of cool that we can just throw those in and always have them ready. Or if you're working with a team and you need to share design assets or resources, libraries are so cool for that. And that's window. Libraries will make that pop up, and you can control what's in your library or set up multiple libraries. I've got a whole bunch set up for different organizations and things that I'm working on. So we can find those ones really, really easily. I do a lot of headshot photography, so I have all the stock backgrounds that I use already saved in my library, so I can pull them in really easily. Can't stress how much time that saves me. But let's continue on. So we're looking here. We added this texture, but now we can't see our subject. We could try to mask around and everything, but what I want to do is just have it affect those white areas. So I'm going to take the blending mode of this layer and change it from normal to multiply or darken. I kind of like what multiply is doing, where it's just going to say, hey, we're darkening that area. Looking pretty nice. And it actually kind of works as a subtle overlay over our subject too. I might mask out just a little teeny tiny bit of her face to really pull attention there. Oh no, I used a hard brush. No worries. We're on that mask and we just take the feather and we soften it. There we go. Now it's just hitting the face. Maybe we want it to hit a little bit more on her skin. Do a couple of clicks that are on there, that nice soft look that's coming throughout. And if it's too much, let's just back it up. And that's where the density comes in. Pure black. If we hit the density, pure black is at 100%. If we slide it down, it goes to a gray. And the more white it is, the more transparent it's going to be. Again, that's alter option. I'm just clicking in it. So now I can pull down the density of this mask until it blends in with the scene. And we feel like we got something. So what are we thinking on this one? Do we like the texture that's being added behind, or was it stronger when it was pure white and we had that really high contrast contemporary look?
This is John. I'm partial to the white, but
I like the white.
Yeah, but I would just crop in so you don't have so much dead space on either side there.
Yeah, so instead of having it so that it's centered on here, coming in and tightening up our composition. That's a really good choice too, where we can have it so that it feels like maybe this is starting to kind of fade through, and we can actually use this to kind of break their composition up. Tighter crop. It looks like we like white in the chat. So again, this is kind of fun. All personal preference on how stuff works and what we're doing. And we can see what we like to do. All right. Next image is from David, and we've got this cathedral that's coming through. Make that a little bit bigger so we can see what's happening with it. So we've got a really, really nice backlit scene. It's coming, adding in some cool texture that's on there. I'm seeing a slight magenta cast and a slight green cast that's coming throughout. So this might be something if we are wanting to play in pure black and white, where we can just take our saturation and we can drop that down and see what it's going to look like with that full tonality that's happening there. By the way, if we are looking at it, creating like a black and white from a color image, there's several different ways to do that. My favorite one is to create a hue saturation layer and just drop down the saturation that's on it. This is going to produce a different effect than if we had gone in and done like the black and white filter. So although it might be pretty similar, in this case actually looking really similar, because we're already probably so low contrast that's on it. But sometimes this is going to be applying a little bit more of a balance. So we're not a straight up just losing all color, but instead we take some of the color channels from each and do it. So if we were looking at a different image, that might be a little bit more pronounced. But the point being that if you drop saturation down, we're keeping all the color profiles and just removing the color aspect on it, which still isn't 100% accurate, but I think that for practical purposes, it's the best option for looking at what desaturated things are. Okay, continuing on. Now that we've kind of removed the color cast that's on there, maybe the color was part of the story, and we do just want to address what it's doing. I kind of like that little bit of color that's on there. So we can play around and say, you know what, let's check out this white balance that's here. We can play maybe warming up the image. That has a little bit more of a power to it. So something that's coming through this stained glass. I kind of like that warming glow that's there, where it feels like it's maybe a sepia that's on there. But we still get some of those other, I've got kind of magenta, almost red cast on these very, very side edges that are there. We could kind of balance out some of that or embrace some of the reds. Kind of fun playing with in different ways. So interesting what's coming up here. I want to look at a completely different approach. I'm going to duplicate this. Controller Command J, doing that one. Let's open this up here in Camera Raw filter again. So inside of Camera Raw, we now have all these really, really bright areas. And I want to make it so that kind of glows a little bit more. So to do that, I'm going to come down here to our effects slider, and we can take the clarity and we can pull that to the left. And now everything's got kind of this glow. See if I can come up here, look at it before. So see how that slider is just really kind of blurring those edges that are coming there, giving us that nice softness that comes through. We could pronounce that even more with the dehaze, but I think that doing that's going to mess up the contrast that we have inside of any of our main scenes. So I'm not going to mess with that one. Clarity's doing it perfect, just giving that little bit of a bloom that's coming there. And I'm going to increase the brightness, the temperature on just this area of it. So we get kind of this nice warm glow, almost like it's irradiating from this main aspect on there. And I'm going to lower the contrast just a hair and pop those whites just a little bit, just for funsies. So we'll say okay on this. So now I've got this kind of warm tone that's there, but I want to add a little bit of depth to the scene. So I'm going to create a mask on this. And actually I want the mask to mask everything out. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option when I create this mask, and it's going to create a negative mask, which means it's entirely filled in. So now I can use my brush and I can paint in, there we go, about where the stained glass is. And I'm not trying to be super tight because I want this to kind of bloom or glow out a little bit. But I can take this area, maybe like that, and we can feather this a whole bunch to really have it kind of glow. There we are. Maybe lower the density so the entire scene gets a little bit of that glow that's on there. Now we've got some depth. So we have really dark areas, and we've got something that's lighter, warmer coming from the central thing. It feels like maybe that part's talking to us a little bit more, right? So we kind of have some fun with how that's playing. I think the vignette might be a little bit too strong on this. So I'm going to take our levels that are up here, see if we can kind of lighten up some of those areas just a little bit. I want to make this a negative mask just by inverting it. Control I or Command I, back up, and let's just paint these edges in. Again, I'm pretty hard on this one because we can always use the, click over here on the mask, we can always feather that up so we've got that softness. There we go. And I can reduce the overall impact. How strong is this one? So it just kind of subtly lightens that up there. Now I've got some nice depth that's coming through. So kind of an interesting take on it. I think that when we have something with any sort of religious undertones to it, that we're going to get some symbolism that naturally emerges from it. So your choice in terms of how far you want to take that. We could do something really, really cool. Like if we wanted to embrace that a whole bunch. I've got, let's see, from Woody Walters, some sunbeam brushes that comes through. If I were to do something like, hey, let's create a curves layer and change that blending mode from normal to screen, inverting that one, and then I'm just going to use this brush and just do a quick click on it. Now I've got some lights that are coming through here. This kind of breaks reality a little bit, but those pillars of light coming down add a really, really neat depth to it, right? So kind of fun being able to play with it in different ways. So we can do that with dark versus light. Like that's kind of a classic study that we can look at. We can play with emerging light. We can play with warm versus cool. We could do something because we've got this in layers that says, you know what, let's do something that's on our base layer and maybe we can cool that one down quite a bit. I could take my base and maybe add in more blues. So maybe a little bit of that. There we go. So that now we get a really, really nice warm going to cool aspect on it. What the correct answer is, I'm not entirely sure. It's going to depend on the story that you want to tell and how much we want to do with it. How true to reality do we want to be? But whenever you decide what you like, back it up, because chances are 100% is going to be too strong on everything. Subtlety tends to be the key that we're looking on there. So I did not get a chance to look at all the images, had so many cool, fun ones that had come up, and there's so many fun stories that are on here. So we're going to be hitting up more of these for next time, but I appreciate everybody taking the time to come and hang out with me. I'm Chris Wooley, the photo professor, and we will see you at office hours next time.